Democrats to stand up and push back and say, no, we're not going to give tax cuts to the rich. This is the type of thing that has ruined this economy already. We've seen it nationally with Wall Street, and we don't need to do this now. And we certainly don't need to go after teachers and state workers' pensions. That was, in my opinion, time some of us were willing to say no and fight for that. Unfortunately, we couldn't get enough Democrats to actually push back. And that's what I'm saying about this race. You know going into this that we're going to be in the minority, whoever wins this seat in Washington. And so I think it's even more important in the minority to fight against the Republicans' constant attack on workers' rights. And this was one of those. And I don't believe that there's any room to say, well, I did it then, but I won't do it now as far as going to Washington. You know that that was a period. We've been here, each of us, over 10 years, and you know the budget system very well. And that was a time when they needed 2/3 votes, and Democrats should have had the backbone to say no on that issue. And we can't get that back. You know, they've got those tax cuts. They've made a $1.5 billion raid on the pension system. We're never going to be able to restore that. But the time was to push back then and say no, and I just think that that was something that, you know, I can't face people that I would do something like that for.
Thank you. Another question for Troy. Yes, ma'am.
It's for both of them.
I'm sorry?
It's for both of them.
We'll just start with Troy. That's fine.
As a representative, back in 2013, we passed legislation combating Lyme disease. And for me, that was a very passionate bill that I strongly advocated for. I know there are some medical issues, underlying medical issues with this, you know, with Lyme disease. Can you tell me where you both stand with the issues of insurance with combating Lyme disease?
Well, absolutely. I mean, where I'm from, you know, we haven't had the problems that other parts of the state have had as of yet with Lyme disease, but we will. We're seeing more and more of a creep towards Northern Maine. But like I said, with all the relationships I've made with people in Oxford County and come to understand it more and more, it's a serious dilemma that's happening in this country, and something that is really hard to believe, you know, where we actually stand in this regard. So the legislation, obviously, Representative Briggs, that I believe you put in, was a very contentious thing. I didn't understand, you know, why so many people were pushing back against something that made such sense to me. You know, like I said, with my heart condition, I've been tested 4 separate times for Lyme disease to see if that's what actually caused it. And at no time was I ever told, after getting a negative test, that, well, these tests may not be accurate. And so every time I thought, well, I don't have Lyme disease, and that was it. And to find out that, you know, a lot of this testing doesn't work. Some people, after having the test, actually do have the Lyme disease. I thought it was appropriate for us to ask medical staff to mention that whenever they're doing their exam, that, you know, this won't actually mean that you don't have Lyme disease. And that bill, as you know, and Senator Patrick knows, got very contentious. People talked about getting in the way of doctor-patient relationships. I didn't see it as that. I saw it as a real serious concern, something that people are you know, really getting serious illness about, and should know everything about you know, what their health care is in this regard. And so I supported it. I think that you know, having those conversations with your doctor and making sure your doctor lets you know that these tests aren't always accurate, you know, don't stop here, is important. And I support making sure that insurance companies cover these type of testing and do everything they can to help people that are found to be having Lyme disease. And many of the insurance companies don't want to cover this type of affliction. So it's a serious concern. It's a real problem in the state, and something that we need to make sure that people are aware of, and insurance companies aren't able to wriggle out of, and doctors explain to people all of the issues that surround Lyme disease and Lyme testing.
Thank you, Troy. Emily?
Thank you. And Representative Briggs, thank you for all of your work on Lyme disease. I think it's amazing how much now everybody, again, knows somebody who's got Lyme disease. For me, it was really brought home in 2012. I was knocking on doors for my Senate race in Lincoln, and I knocked on the door, as you do, and this woman answered the door, and I got to talking, and she was a physician who had to ultimately leave her job as a doctor in rural Maine because she couldn't work anymore because of Lyme disease. And Lyme disease didn't used to exist in Maine, and that gets into a whole, we could really get into climate change if you want to talk about what's causing the spread of Lyme throughout the Northeast now, where it never used to be a problem. I absolutely think insurance companies have to cover it. We need to make sure we get patients informed. I think the ultimate version of that bill included information from the lab, as I recall, about different kinds of testing. I'd have to go back and look. But I think it's important that we keep pushing. Absolutely, it should be covered. And I think it's a very scary reality that in Maine we're now going to have to deal with. And I know there's a lot of work going on across the state to educate people about what to look for. Sometimes pictures are not fun to look at when they show them on the news about how to find a tick, how to take it off, how to help your dog or your cat. And I think the best thing we can do is keep talking about it and keep raising awareness and taking action. So thank you so much for your work.
Other questions? Yes?
Hi. I mean, we've seen over the last few years more than a few opportunities where people stand around and say, our hearts and prayers and minds are with people who have been victims of shooting incidents. Can you tell us where you stand on the issues of gun control?
Me first, thank you. Gun violence is terrifying and it's awful, and I think we need to take steps as elected officials and in our communities to combat gun violence, and we need to make sure that we keep in mind the constitutional rights and freedoms that Maine people particularly are very important to them. I believe strongly that we need background checks, we need comprehensive background checks for sure. I've voted that for the last 10 years every time it came up. I'm a big believer that that is one of the most important things we can do for gun safety right now. I think we also need to invest in mental health and making sure we're taking care of the whole person because it has a lot to, the violence that happens isn't just because we don't have background checks. I mean, there's so many pieces of the puzzle there. And so I believe strongly we need to take action when it comes to gun violence. And I think background checks, comprehensive background checks are really the smartest way to start.
Thank you. Troy?
Well, again, starting out as a parent, I maybe would have a lot different view if I was one of those parents, because that is unbelievable what has happened in some of the places. That being said, I think for the most part, Maine has had a great culture of parents teaching their children safety. I am someone that definitely believes the people in this state being able to hunt and have firearms. That being said, I've said throughout my time that I would support a background check legislation if it made sense for all Maine. What we've seen in the last session when we had people come in and talk to us about an amended version, what it would do. I think when they left there was more questions than there were before we came in. People didn't understand how it was going to work in the rural areas. I know in my part of the state, I didn't at all understand how the amended version was going to work for people in Maine. So, I mean, I'm not averse to background checks, but I want to make sure that it works for people that have had the gun safety in the state and used guns in an accurate and correct way.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience?
You know me, Bob. I always get a question. I held back.
I just want to make sure there's no one else who wants to go.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Hearing no one else? We have someone?
I just want to follow up on what we've been talking about guns. Specifically, do you support, this is for both of you.
Yeah, and this will be answered for the next one.
Okay.
That's fine.
Guns in schools and on college campuses, guns for game wardens, what else? Supermarkets, whatever, concealed weapons. I mean, do you have opinions about restricting places that people can have their guns?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, in our time, I think both our times, we've had bills for keeping guns off of college campuses. school grounds, stuff like that, I definitely support that. I mean, that's something that, is a no-brainer in my opinion. This session, we had a bill for fire wardens, not game wardens, but forest rangers, excuse me. Yeah, they used to be called fire wardens, now they're forest rangers. I supported that. We used to have a lot of forest rangers in my area of the state. I actually used to go with my uncle to a place called Anzaspis and patrol there with him whenever I was, 5, 6 years old. And what he used to do compared to what I see the Rangers doing today is a lot different. I do feel that they're put in harm's way at times. I know that because I've passed legislation that's had them actually have to do more for their jobs. And sometimes they're out there by themselves. And I had discussions with a lot of the Rangers. I went into it thinking that I wasn't going to support it. And when I talked to them about the fact that they were in those positions, many times whenever a game warden or state police wanted them to go with them, because we don't have enough of those people either, they felt that they couldn't take them with them because they were putting them in harm's way. So I changed my position on that, and this session, I fought for it. I was frustrated that the governor vetoed that bill also. And, I think that, they deserve to feel that they're safe out there. And so I've supported that. But, there's definitely places that I don't believe the guns are appropriate. College campuses, schools, elementary schools are all off limits. Courthouses, hospitals, you name it. But, I don't think that's the main, what we have going here. I think we have people that want to use them for hunting activities. We've done a good job with that. There's some people that have definitely gone too far trying to push gun rights, and I don't support those people.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you. I definitely support restricting guns in schools. I think college campuses are also a place guns should not be on campus. I'll tell you a story. I worked as a resident assistant when I was in college at the University of Maine. And during hunting season, they actually had a policy on campus where students could leave their guns at public safety, at the police department, so that they could get up early and get them and go hunting. That's important. People like to do that. And I think it's common sense things like that that make people able to keep their guns rather than, God forbid, bringing them into the residence halls or keeping them in their back seats. It made sense, trying to value and make it easy for people to go hunting in a responsible way without having those guns be just around campus. And so that was a good, thoughtful way, I think, to approach that. I think this past session working with the Forest Rangers was a wonderful experience. They were extremely passionate about the issue, and I did support that bill as well. I think the role of the Forest Rangers has changed a lot, and what they're encountering now, it's appropriate for them to have the training and have the firearms that they need to do their jobs effectively. And that was common sense to me. But I think this question around guns is going to keep coming up. I did not support the open carry legislation, for example, that was brought forward by Republicans this session to just allow, without no concealed carry permit, to have a gun. And that was not a good plan, I think, for me. And I was glad to see that bill fail. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the audience? Would you like to answer?
Yeah. I was coming across the bridge today in Lisbon over by the old Warumbo Mill there, and now it says on it, 1 truck at a time. And as I'm driving across and I'm looking at the concrete that has disappeared and the rebar is showing, I'm thinking, are there too many vehicles on this bridge right now? It seems to me that in this country we should be able to find money to fix our infrastructure and the bridges that were built before we were maybe born. And, it seems to me that we could put people to work, and we can't outsource it. Where do you all stand on that? Bringing home some bacon so we can not fall in the river?
Absolutely. And, in my time in Augusta, I've been on the Appropriations Committee for a lot of years, and the best moments are when we were able to put together large bond packages to invest in roads and bridges and draw down those federal match dollars for roads, bridges, ports, ferries, airports, trains. and because it all needs work across the state. And I'm sure Senator Jackson would agree, we both travel these roads now all the time, and there isn't a day goes by that I don't hit something or hear something or see something and I say, we've got to do better. So I absolutely support I would do everything I could as a member of Congress, like I have as a member of the legislature over the past 10 years, to focus our investments on that infrastructure. Because, as I said earlier, to the answer to the first question, that's how we literally build the foundation of how we grow our economy for the future. That's how we enable companies to move their goods, people to move safely, and to live in places all across the state. They can get there safely. So I think there's a lot of ways the federal government works. There's all kinds of programs that they run just to help support different types of state infrastructure. And I think the fact that I've had that background on the finance side at the state level will make me a strong advocate for pairing up some of those federal resources with the state dollars.
Right?
Well, I think this is about priorities, and people talk about going back years ago or something like that, but when we were in a recession, back in the 30s, I mean, what did Roosevelt do? He started building things. Sometimes people even question, what good it was, but what it did was it put people to work, and we started getting interstate systems and things like that. And so for myself, I mean, it's the same thing here in Maine as it is nationally. I mean, there's too many people in Washington that are focusing on giving tax breaks, giving away everything, and there's no resources left to do that. I mean, if you spend $400 million in tax breaks here, that's going to choke out some of the resources that we can use to actually build roads and things in this state. And so, I mean, I think that, fighting wars that aren't paid for, giving Wall Street breaks, those are all things that have to stop. And we have to have a reprioritization to start doing, infrastructure, putting people to work in this country, in this state. And that's something that, I very much want to start having those conversations. There's too many people that all they want to do is talk about, we'll cut our taxes. I don't believe that's the answer. I think putting people to work and more people having money in their pockets in this economy is actually what the answer is. And building roads and bridges definitely puts people to work. And in this state, we're way, way behind on it. I mean, it'll take a long time to get caught back up.
Thank you, Troy. Questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
So Troy just mentioned putting more money back into people's pockets, which is exactly what the goal should be in an economy like this right now. My question kind of focuses more on post-secondary education and the problems that we found with massive student loan debt that people have now. And essentially it's a two-part question. So I'm curious about what you would do for those of us now that are facing, especially high student loan burden. For example, myself, I pay 15% of my income towards student loans, which, I'm living with my parents. It's not the worst thing in the world, but friends that I have, who are single parents, my age, maybe not making the income that I'm making even, haven't been able to find the jobs that we were necessarily hoping to getting out of college, which, we kind of expected going into it. It's not going to be handed to you, but it's a two-part question that I want to know what you would do to address the issue as it stands with the debt that's already accumulated, whether or not that be, I guess, chopping off some of the interest rate that we have to pay, because the fact is if you don't pay the maximum amount of money now per month, what you end up doing is essentially paying your student loans for the rest of your life. And so, as someone that could easily put that money back into the economy, whether it be a new house or a new car, which are exactly the kinds of things that really need to, have that boost, that's a significant part of the problem. The other part is not so much a question, more is like, what is your ultimate solution for, going forward into the future? Not the debt that's already accumulated for, students that are out of school, but how can we make it so that, it doesn't happen for kids that are coming out of high school and going to college? I'm not discounting or excluding tech programs as well. So, I want to hear your ideas as far as, the normal college university setting, as well as, tech programs and certificate degrees. What do you think we can do to get people educated as best we can for the workforce without putting this massive, burden of debt on their backs as they enter?
Thank you. Troy?
Great question. There's no doubt about it. I agree with you 100%. I mean, we're running our education system in this country like we are our healthcare system. It's a for-profit scam. I mean, it's basically the policing of America. What people were promised as far as being able to go to school, get educated, get a good job, and get the American dream, that's not happening for not near enough people. And I think it's a real tragedy that so many people were made to feel that this is what their path to success was, and when they end up getting there, all they find out is that they have crushing debt. In my family, my wife has outrageous student loans, exactly what you talked about. They're in deferment right now. I mean, she's just paying the interest, and we don't expect to get out of them. And Chase is here, he has student debt, so for us it's generational, and I really don't know how we are going to get out of it, but I know every month when those payments come in, it hurts, it hurts a lot. So I feel it, very much, but I think that, one of the ways, right off the bat, again, I hate to keep coming back to this, but I really do think it's part of what the problem is with the country, is that the people on Wall Street got everything they wanted for far too long, and they got bank bailouts that they didn't have to pay any interest back. They got the absolute best deals that you could ever imagine. Why we can't do that same thing for students in this country? Give them loans or give them Pell Grants that have no or absolutely hardly any interest. I don't understand why we're not talking about this more. I mean, if the banks could get that absolute best deal ever, then I think that putting that same type of deal on the table for our students, like Senator Warren is talking about, is a no-brainer and something that we shouldn't even have to debate. If Wall Street can get the big deals, Main Street should be able to get them too. So that would be something that I'd start out with. We talked about a lot in this campaign nationally, the Robin Hood tax. Again, financial transactions on stock exchanges and things like that, they don't have to pay them. Everyone else in this room has to pay taxes on purchases. We should be taxing those people. They're going to be fined. They got all kinds of money, a little bit on each one of those transactions, so that you could put it into something like Pell Grants or low interest loans for people to get out of. And I agree that the people that are right now with that debt, if we want to spur the economy, get them out from underneath that debt right now. That'll certainly make a huge difference. I think that was a failure of the bank bailouts. Instead of giving the banks some money, we should have given the homeowners money so they pay off their loans. The banks would have got their money anyways, and then everyone would have been come out of this tear. But we didn't do that. We capitulated and give it to the Wall Street types again. And that's why we're still struggling today with the low housing markets and things like that. So I don't know if I've answered all your questions. I understand exactly what you're talking about, and I think that that's part of the problem. I mean, we've got a Congress full of millionaires. Congress full of millionaires that are listening to the millionaires, and they're not paying attention to things like you and I have trouble with. Emily.
Thank you. I live in a college town and I work at the University of Maine. Every single day I encounter students who are not sure they're going to be able to come back the next semester. Or we had commencement 2 weeks ago, and the number of students that came across the stage, I know so many of them are coming out with just drowning in debt. And it's wrong. I think we made a mistake as a country when the federal government got in the loan business rather than in the let's make college more affordable business. The Pell Grants were originally supposed to pay for 75% of the cost of college. That's a fact. Now you're lucky if they cover 20%, maybe, and that's for those who need the most financial help. In the 90s, we created the Hope and Lifetime Learning Tax Credits to target middle-class families. Those are good programs, but they need to be updated because now the cost of college is completely out of whack. And it drives me crazy when I watch television, which is not very often these days, but you see the commercials that says there's blah, 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 billions of dollars available for you to go to college. And it's sponsored by the federal government. We have to do what Senator Elizabeth Warren is talking about with allowing students to refinance their debt. If you can refinance your mortgage, you should be able to refinance your student debt. You used to be able to lock in your rate at 2% for the life of a loan. And now, in fact, it happened under George W. Bush, gave the power back to the loan companies, and let them float the rates, and people are paying so much of their hard-earned money, they can't get into the career they wanted to. They can't start the business they dreamed of because it's holding back. The way we finance higher education in this country is not sustainable. And I think it involves both, invigorating things like the Pell Grants and those tax credits, but also convening that national conversation about what's driving this cost. And is it really what's in the best interest of students? Because I'm not convinced that it is. This is a real soapbox issue for me. The University of Maine, I was lucky, offered a college education that my family could afford. And I'm so grateful for that. But, traveling around the state, you just meet so many people whose kids can't live at home. Not actually at home, there's nothing wrong with that. But can't live, there's nothing wrong with it, but who can't live where they grew up because they have to move someplace to take a job that pays them more that is not really what they want to do. And that's not how we're going to build our economy here in Maine. We need to make sure we address the issues around affordability and the way we finance higher education so people can make the choice to have that career they wanted and invest in the communities where they grew up.
Thank you. Question?
Just in follow-up to that end, I would ask if both of you then, Opportunity Maine is a great program. I know my daughter was involved in developing that. One of the flaws in the program, as I see it, is that as a native daughter of the state of Maine, I had to go out of state to get the education that was required for me to keep my position. But now I can't come back to Maine because I can't get my student loans paid because I was not educated in Maine. Is there a way that you see through some of the work in Congress that we could look at how do we help people who need to leave still come back where they want to be to do exactly what you said, Emily, make a difference in the lives of the people around them. That is all I ever wanted to do, and I cannot come back here to do it. What can you do in Congress to help those of us who need that kind of assistance? And it is the massive student loan debt that keeps me out of state. What can you do in Congress to help?
It's you.
I think it's me. Thank you. And a quick note on Opportunity Maine. This is the tax program for people who get educated in Maine, stay in Maine, and they can deduct some of their taxes, their student loan payments from their taxes. And I was very proud, even though they collected all the signatures to put it on the ballot, I was on that appropriations committee that said, no, this is a good bill. We don't need to send this to the people of Maine. We're just going to pass it. And we made that bill law that year, and I've been supporting it and the expansion of it ever since. It's a smart idea. It set Maine apart across the country, and Maine people really are benefiting from that program. I think from the federal level, we need to find ways to partner with programs like that. There's a lot of examples across the nation of regional programs like Opportunity Maine, the Georgia Hope Scholarship, for example, that has dedicated revenues that are just going to higher education, loan relief, and scholarships. I don't know that we can do an Opportunity Maine program for the whole country, but I think that's exactly why we need to go back to those tax credit programs from the 90s, the Hope Lifetime Learning Tax Credits, and make sure they're working for families today. Because now, education is no longer just place-based. Now you get educated all over the place, and sometimes you're in the state you want to live in, but you're taking classes other places. And I don't think our federal higher education funding system has adapted to that reality. That now so much education happens not just online, but at a distance. And even, people have to sometimes leave to come back. And I don't think our loan structure and our finance structure matches up with that. And I think that's something we need to work on specifically to enable people to have that portability that you're talking about.
Thank you. Troy.
Well, I think, the first and probably only way to make sure that you don't have crushing student debt is to make sure that we have an education system in this country that's not, trying to make extreme profits off the backs of people that want to get educated and get a better job. I mean, it's the same thing. Why don't we start using some of that money and give higher tax cuts, tax breaks for people that are actually working in this state, working in this country. Why don't we not worry about where we're dumping some of the money for corporations that don't ever give any benefit to the state, and make sure that people like yourself, that whenever you want to come back to your state, that there's actually a job here. We have a lot of programs for underserved rural areas, but I think if we just attack the problem of too many people trying to make obscene profits off of people that want to further their education, I think that solves a lot of the problems to start with. And I don't think that there's really any sense nibbling around the edges trying to create another program that you can get out of your debt if you come to this state, or if you're underserved area. I think just tacking the idea that everyone in this country should have the ability to get a quality education and not worry about having to pay for it for the rest of their lives. I think that's where we start, and I think that solves all problems.
Thank you. Questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
My question is about negative attack ads. And I'm wondering, I've seen a couple, and I'm wondering if in this campaign we could have a campaign without negative attack ads. I've seen some in this campaign that just scares me. Very impressed with the presentation, looking tonight. I wonder how you feel about that.
Well, I would certainly like to have that, but I certainly don't feel that way right now. Over the last week and a half, $150,000 coming into the state of Washington, attacking me and my record on standing up for people in my Senate district. I don't feel like the ads have been very positive, and I think that's a problem with Washington. I think that there's too many people down there that are trying to get the certain type of congresspeople elected, and they're willing to spend any amount of money to make that happen. And guys like me, and guys probably like yourself, I don't normally get to go to Washington because we don't know all the elite people, and we don't know all the wealthy people in this country, and I think a lot of that is about control, making sure that they keep a grip on everything and make sure it doesn't get out of control. And I've said it, very much over the last week or so. I'm not at all deterred by this because, when I got started 15 years ago in politics, there was a billionaire trying to shut me up then too. And that's what made me want to run for legislature. And if this is it for me, and there's a billionaire trying to shut me up now, there's going to be people in the state that's going to know about it. And I'm not going to worry about people in the Democratic Party calling me and telling me to lose quietly. And don't talk about people like Donald Sussman and Adam Millian. Don't make them feel, I actually been told, don't hurt their feelings. So they got enough money to buy some new ones, as far as I'm concerned. So money in politics is a huge issue for me. And I believe that we need to make sure that this type of things don't happen. The Republican side are definitely attacking each other. I would like to not have that happen. I think we have a campaign here certainly showing what the differences are in the campaign. But, it definitely shows a lot of what the problems are when people can dump $150,000 into a campaign, which is about half of what I've raised throughout this campaign. And just like that, they can distort the truth. I just think that that's completely unfortunate, a real problem with our society, and something that we need to do better from because, like I said, Congress is full of millionaires. Why is that? Because they have the money to portray things the way they want. And, I am very much, I think I'm even more into this now over the last couple of weeks, and I think it's going to backfire on me. Thank you.
I don't like negative campaigning either. And the mailings that Senator Jackson was talking about, I learned about them the same day he did when they came out in the press release. And I'm proud that my campaign has not repeated that message. We didn't put out any statements. We have stuck with the facts. And the facts are we do have different records. And it's okay to talk about that. And I'm proud that my campaign is on TV right now with a 100% positive ad about who I am, why I'm running, and what I want to do when I get to Washington. That's the kind of campaign that I'm running. And I think it's terrible. And I didn't know we'd receive calls like that from anyone, and I think that's terrible. And that's certainly not how it should go. But there's a difference between being negative and talking about differences in voting records. And that should be okay. We've talked about some differences in voting records already here tonight on past budgets. And that's why when I talk about the campaign, talk about differences, it's not a judgment of who's good or who's bad, but there are factual differences. The differences are, I've never voted to take away a woman's right to make her own health care decisions, ever. I've always stood up for equality, every single time. And it's true that I have a 90% lifetime rating from the League of Conservation Voters. Those are facts. And they do mark differences in this race. Just as you've heard tonight, there are style differences between us as well. But my campaign, we're running a positive campaign. All the paid media we're doing is positive. And I'm proud of that. And certainly, I don't like negative campaigning either, but I do think it's appropriate and I think it's okay to talk about the facts of your records when they're different. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question, and then we'll be doing closing remarks.
Since the PATCO strike in 1980, I think it was, it's 81, it's always been about the economy, but what it is since then, it's been about the economy and taking it away from working men and women. You both have been in Augusta for 10 or 12 years. What have you done for working men and women, and what have you garnered in awards or endorsements through your service to working men and women?
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you. I'm actually proud. People don't often know this about me. I'm proud to be a union member myself through my job at the University of Maine. I have been for the last 10 years, and I will say that there really has not been a stronger voice than Senator Patrick on issues around working people in Augusta, and someone that I learned from in my very first term about the importance of things like OSHA, for example, something that I learned a lot about. I never sat on the labor committee, but I'm proud that in my time in Augusta, I have a 100% rating from the AFL-CIO, been endorsed in all my state campaigns. In this, I think the best thing I ever did, if I was going to pick one thing, was absolutely one of the most difficult things. And both Senator Jackson and Senator Patrick and others in this room were involved in it. It was when we became in the minority for the first time in more than 30 years. The Republicans came with a wish list of things they'd been waiting to do all along. And towards the top of that list was right to work, was taking away the right of Maine people to collectively bargain, to organize. And it was bad legislation. It was bad legislation that would have hurt Maine people, and in other states where they had that, I believe it hurt them there. And in that 2-year period, they tried every which way to get that bill passed. And I'm proud that we were able to stand firm against it. It took a lot of us. It took relationships across the aisle. It took those bipartisan, really just accountability across the aisle, those relationships, to say we are not going to let that awful legislation come into the state of Maine. And in that session where there were so many terrible decisions, so many losses that we had because we simply didn't have the votes, I'm so proud that we were able to hold the line on right to work. I think that's something that we are as a state better for having that fight, that session, and winning in the minority. In the way, I've earned a few labor endorsements in this race, most recently there's been a few, but the Maritime Engineers, which was a great one, and IBEW Local 104, which is the outside linemen, have come into the race. I'm proud of that. And I'm very proud of the relationships that I have had, even through this entire race, with working men and women and with labor across the state. And I look forward to continuing to be a strong advocate for organized labor and for all working people in the state of Maine as a member of Congress.
Thank you, Lynn. Roy?
I served 10 years on my 12-in labor committee, and that's where I wanted to be. That's what my background is and why I got into politics. I don't like to really talk about myself much, but through that time, fighting for minimum wage, collective bargaining, workers' comp, I had the opportunity to get Solidarity Award from steel workers, Francis Perkins Award from the Western Maine Labor Council, Eddie Bollier Award from the AFL, Friend of Education from the MEA. And it was only because I was standing up for the things that I believed in, fighting passionately for those things. And I think that's, another big thing about this race. I mean, in 10 years' time on the Labor Committee, I mean, I know very well who voted for labor bills, who fought for them. I know who's in the room, and because of that, in this race, I've had 33 different labor organizations endorse my campaign, including the Maine AFL-CIO. And I think that talks a lot about, them knowing who's fighting for those bills too. If they decide to pick the Democrat in this primary and actually endorse them, because there's clear differences in who stands up and fights and who goes into a room and compromises. I won't compromise on those things. Those are core issues, like I said, that I don't believe in compromise. I think we compromise too much, and I'm not going to make any bones about it. So those are, big issues for me, and that's why I'm very proud to have Working Men and Women's endorsement in the state, and something that, it's something that I don't want to ever go back and look somebody in the face and say, well, I'm sorry, I just, compromised on workers' comp, which, we had a huge defeat in the 125th. I compromised on your pension system. Those are things that I can't do because I don't want them done to me. And I know very well what it means for people to lose those things. And so that's why, for the most part, organized labor has endorsed me, even though I've only had the opportunity to be in the union for a very short time early in my career.
Thank you, Troy. I just want to say thank you to Troy and Emily. It's been a very informative forum tonight. We will have 3-minute closing remarks from the candidates, and by coin toss, Emily will be going first and Troy will be going last. So I will ask you for your closing remarks at this point.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you, Bob. You did a great job moderating. And again, I want to thank the Oxford County Democrats for having us here tonight. As you can see, there are a lot of differences in this race, and they are important to pay attention to. Differences in record, differences in style. I'm proud of my record over the past 10 years, and I believe it is very clear. I have always stood up for a woman's right to choose. I have always stood up for equality. I have always stood up for the environment, and I have always stood up for opportunities to grow Maine's economy. I'm known as somebody who works across the aisle, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be someone who knows how to find common ground without compromising core values. When you're not willing to compromise, you end up with what we have in Washington right now, which is gridlock, which is shutdown, which is a complete stall on growing our economy, on really working on the Affordable Care Act and how to improve it, on tackling issues like student loan reform, and making sure that Maine veterans and veterans across the country are taken care of. It's gridlock, it's lack of working together, it's a fear of bipartisanship that gets in the way of us making those investments we need to, of making sure our budgets aren't just full of sequestration and just temporary, making sure they're really about setting priorities. My record over the past 10 years has been to be someone who stays at that table, especially when it's hard, especially when it is so difficult that there are no good choices in front of you. I'm proud of that record. And when I go to Washington, whether I'm in the majority or the minority, I know that Maine people can count on me to stay and fight for them, because there are things worth fighting for. But at some point, the fighting has to stop, and the leading starts to have to start happening. The working across the aisle, the communication, the talking about values, but not being afraid to hear the other side. Staying away from personality politics, staying away from demonizing your opponent. That's no way to run a government. That's no way to find solutions to growing our economy. And when I'm in Washington every single day, I will be focused on ways to give more opportunity to Maine people and to get our economy moving in the 2nd District. That will be my priority every day, I promise you that. I look forward to working with you. I ask for your vote on June 10th, and I thank you so much for having me here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate the opportunity here tonight too. You know, I would say that you obviously have the choices to make, and you know, I'll respect them either way. But I think you know, this comes down to me. What I think a lot of people that are actually working class have to decide. You know, in my lifetime, you know, I've seen very much firsthand how you know, big business will come into an area and feel that they can push their way around, and I just believe that for too often working class people have had to accept that, and I think that, you know, it's past time. You know, we've had too many compromises in this race. You know, when you hear it tonight, it's not really anything that's even hard to talk about. I mean, Senator Kane is more interested in coming up with a compromise. In the past, those compromises ended up being bad for working class people. I never thought I was going to run for Congress, but when I looked around at what we were going to have for options, just like 15 years ago, when I got involved in politics, I felt that there was no one in the room that was going to be fighting for people like me. And so I've chosen to run this race because I think it's important that working class people have a seat at the table also. And in my opinion, that doesn't happen near enough. You can't talk about compromises and take away pensions for $1.5 billion, compromises that give tax cuts to the rich. Where was the compromise for working class people? What did we get in return in those deals? And what have we gotten in return from what we've seen in our economy in Wall Street currently? We haven't got anything. They've gotten it all, in my opinion. And I think it's okay. I think it's a real problem for people in Maine that feel like they can't ask for more. I believe that we need more. I believe that we should have more. And I think it's okay to ask for more, because we are part of this world. We're part of this economy, me and you. And we deserve to have somebody that is fighting for us every time that they're at the table. I don't believe that's a bad thing to fight for your values. I don't. I think that we've been told too often to shut up. And that's what's happening exactly in this race. People don't want to lose control. And I just think that that's unfortunate and what the problem is currently. And that's not who I am. It isn't. I mean, I want to get along with everyone. I really do. But when it comes down to our core issues, our core values, health care, Social Security, workers' rights, I'm not going to turn around and worry about guys like Governor LePage or guys like John Boehner. Those people have been in front of me my entire life. And I'm not afraid to push back on those people, because I think that we matter too. And if you want the status quo in this race, you're not going to vote for me, because that's not what I offer you. I offer you somebody that's going to fight like crazy on these issues, because they matter to me, and I know they matter to you. And it's time that we quit feeling like we can't give more in this country. I think that it's incredible how much they've been able to push down that type of mentality on us. So, I mean, you can see it very well in what we're dealing with here. If you want somebody that knows what it's like to struggle in this country, I'm your guy. If you want somebody that's going to compromise away your values, well, then don't vote for me. Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment to introduce Kathy Wilk, Chair of the Yakima County Democratic Party. Kathy?
Birthday girl.
But I would like to just take a moment. We have many of our own